Hello, everyone. Welcome to this eighth session of Coffee with Cosmos DB. I am your host for today. I'm Abhinav Tripathi, and you must be wondering where Sajee is. You'll be surprised at the end of the introduction. So, we had some great session on throttling last time. So, if you missed on to that session, you can go back and watch the recording. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you wish to know more about Cosmos DB and the awesome features that we are rolling out. uh, if you are joining this session for the first time, uh, let me tell you that this whole series, Coffee with Cosmos DB, is around delivering knowledge about Cosmos DB features from the experts to the community. So, if you are uh, interested in knowing more, you go and subscribe to the channel. If you would be interested in conducting a session with us, share your knowledge, how you run your workloads on Cosmos DB, how certain features work, and all that. You can get in touch with us, and we can cover that in one of the sessions that we have. Uh, all right, so without further delay, let me introduce our guest for today. We have our very own Sajee on the other side. So, welcome, Sajee. How are you
Hey
doing
Abhinav,
today?
yeah, I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, I'm filling into your shoes today, so feels good.
Yeah, it's always good to see you on the other side. So yeah, excited about this session. Let's crack it.
Yeah. So, Saji, we do talk about in our discussions all the time. I come from an Android development background, so all my life I have developed only the Android apps. And then you were talking about this JAMstack and data API builder. So I understand that it has something to do with the, on the website, the JavaScript side. Is that so? And so I'm very curious to know about this whole stack, like what it does, how does it help developers. And I think that will be helpful if you can start by telling like what is
Sure.
all this about.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Abhinav. I think just to set up the context, so this particular feature that we are going to discuss today, Data API Builder, which we announced in public preview last month, is mainly for the developers to build a Jamstack application. So when I mentioned Jamstack, if you are from the web development background, there have been several frameworks, JavaScript frameworks existed over the years, right? And you might have heard MeanStack, MERNStack, and yeah, and it goes on. So Jamstack has been a buzzword in the last 3 to 4 years. So developers who are building Jamstack typically deals with these fundamental concepts like the word J. I mean, J stands for JavaScript, A stands for APIs, and stands for markup. So the
Mhm.
fundamental advantage it provides is that these applications are built using the front end frameworks and then um, deployed as static site. So I will talk about the difference between traditional application and also Jamstack applications. In a traditional application, imagine if you have a shopping cart application using three-tier architecture. So when a user hits the um, index page, what happens is that some logic is being written on a, say, Java or PHP code that executes the SQL queries on the database that you have, and then which returns the data in the form of JSON, and then that gets binded on the front end that you see as a customer. So there is an additional layer that you see in the app server, which process the the logic in order to fetch that information. Uh, I mean, in this case, the developers have to write code, and if there are any changes, they have to go back and forth, do the changes, and then deploy. Right. In case of Jamstack, you can think of a single page application. I hope like everyone is aware of what single page is. If you're using Facebook, Facebook is a single page application. So in this type of apps, when you do a build, what you get to see is a static content in the form of HTML and CSS. So static content is served through the CDN, which initially loads the static content in the form of HTML, uh, and the data is loaded through the APIs, which makes things faster. So there is no additional layer here, which you know which acts as a hop. So with all these factors, you get better performance, and then you can add own security mechanisms using jar token or like resource tokens. And then most of these applications are backed by serverless frameworks, so it gives you the capability to scale according to the way you need. And finally, with all these frameworks that we spoke about in the JavaScript world, it comes with better developer experience. So there are a number of tools to deal with JAMstack apps. So that's how easy it is to create JAMstack app. Since I talk about APIs, fundamentally there has been so many API
Mhm.
mechanisms. Like if you are coming from the developer background, we had SOAP, and then we have REST, then we have GraphQL. So among these different API mechanisms, if you look at the state of API report, it says that REST and GraphQL are the top widely used mechanisms, and REST has been existing over the years. And then GraphQL adoption has evolved over the last 4 to 5 years, which basically GraphQL was introduced by Facebook back in 2012 just to cater their own needs. But right now, it has been adopted by many companies, many developers to, yeah, cater their own needs. And yeah, any questions so far, Abhinav?
Uh, so as you mentioned, GraphQL, so that is always a confusion. Like when we mention GraphQL, what is this graph? And like it's a query language. QL stands for query language. So what does it do exactly, and what is it
Got it.
exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for the audience who are watching this, just to summarize on what GraphQL is about and also what capabilities it provides. You can take this particular screen that I'm showing right now. You can assume this as a web application. If you're building this using a typical REST endpoints, what you see here is basically the speaker information, and then whatever the sessions that he has done, and the demos. So basically, you are issuing three particular requests in order to fetch this data. Um, when the user hits this URL, right? And you can obviously argue that I will build a single endpoint to cater this requirement, but in a large scale application, how many developers are going to do that? Because you have to create custom endpoints for your custom requirements. So that is not feasible. So this is where GraphQL comes into play. Basically, if I have to talk about GraphQL, the Graph and GraphQL are totally two different things. Graph is a database. We have the support on Azure Cosmos DB in the form of Gremlin API, but GraphQL is a query language which was introduced by Facebook. Basically, it allows the creation of semantic layer over the data that you possess, which basically abstracts the underlying data structure. So whenever you send a GraphQL request, uh, you get what exactly you need, right? So nothing more than that or nothing less. So it avoids the n+1 data problems. And also GraphQL queries are always predictable. It returns always predictable results. So applications using GraphQL are always fast because the user controls the data what they get, not the server. And you get additional features like specificity because the developer controls the things that he needs, and it also provides performance, provides flexibility, and also the client implementation because you take the control of caching, you take control of the headers that you need to be passed without talking to the backend developer because you are controlling the API directly on the front end. So these are some of the advantages. Definitely, there are disadvantages as well, which I will not cover in this step. But if I have to talk about one of the disadvantages, learning curve is high when it comes to GraphQL, and also the caching has been a problem. And also, since it was introduced by Facebook, there are guidelines the spec given by Facebook, and you can't deviate from those. So those are some of the disadvantages. And if you have to talk about fundamental concepts, these are the fundamental concepts, and there are much more concepts such as resolvers, which I will not dive in here because those resolvers are automatically generated through data API builder. So schema is one of them. Schema is all about the data that you want to uh, deal with through the GraphQL endpoint. And then queries is something similar to get operations in the REST world. And then mutations is something like post and put operations in the REST world. So what are the changes that you do on the data is called as mutation. What are the fetch operation that you do on the data is called as queries. And then finally, we have subscription. So whenever you do some updates on the data, what are the changes that the data goes through, it has to be reflected through the to the front end. So assume in Cosmos DB we have this change feed mechanisms to get the changes, right? So these subscriptions can be supported in the form of through GraphQL, so that developers don't have to write their own code to fetch the changes from the backend. These are handy when you're building like notification system and things like that. Any
So
questions?
So if I were to understand it correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. So earlier there used to be backend developers, they will write API contracts, right? And then
Correct,
the application on the application front, we'll have to consume those that data and use it selectively. But
correct.
with
Yeah,
GraphQL, the end application developer can define what they want and they get only that much, so it reduces the payload as well. It
correct,
speeds up everything, and depending on who is consuming the data, they can have different requirements, and as a backend developer I could not cater to all of those requirements earlier, but now the onus is on the application developer, so they
correct.
can use it. All
That's
right, so
exactly
this
what we are. Yeah,
provides a lot of flexibility to the end application developer.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So how is like GraphQL? It explains. Okay, so clear benefits. I see there. So how does it fit into the whole data API builder scenario? What is it exactly?
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So this is kind of the end-to-end flow on the data API builder. So we are talking only the engine side, but we have certain other components like when you consider the managed service through static web apps. So in this case, this particular data API builder engine is open sourced.
Hmm.
Basically, what it needs is that these two files. So one is the GraphQL schema, basically which we spoke about in the previous slide, right? So user have to define, okay, this is particular structure that I want to deal with. That is one thing. And then the configuration file. So configuration file is the one that developer instruct, okay, the data API builder to use um, based on the configuration options provided, say the data source, say the entities that you want to connect to, say the authorization policy, say the developer settings that you want to enable on the local developer experience. So I will show a quick demo on that. So once these two files are provided, and this schema file is applicable to NoSQL API on Cosmos DB, because as you know, like schema NoSQL API on Cosmos DB is schema agnostic, and we are letting the developers to provide, okay, the schema file and what they want to expose through the GraphQL endpoint. So once this information is provided, the runtime will pick up this information and it will auto generate the GraphQL endpoint for Cosmos DB, and this for all relational databases, as well as for for a relational database. We support both. For Cosmos DB, since we already have a REST endpoint, we are enabling only the GraphQL endpoint through data API builder, and it will have the entity types, the output types, queries and mutations supported through the data API builder. So as a developer, within quick time, you should be able to generate the GraphQL endpoint. Currently, we support two
To
ways to,
that
yeah,
to the previous slide, Saji, I have a question on that. So
yeah.
the runtime that we have in the middle, so this is hosted by Cosmos DB or Azure services? Is it automatically hosted or like?
So currently, yeah, that part I will explain. The first part, there are two ways to consume it. So the engine part, it's itself a container, so you can download it as a container image, and then you can host it on your local environment or host it in container instances or app service, or say AKS if you want to scale it out, or container apps. So there are different ways to host this container. So this is open source. I mean, if I have to show the repo, you can just navigate to data API builder, and then we have, if you go to the release tab, you can download it as a NuGet package, as a container, and then run it. So that is one way. And the second way is the managed service, which we are enabling through Azure Static Web Apps, because Azure Static Web Apps is one of the previous services for web developers to deploy the static web applications. So as a developer, you have the capability to use the front end as well as the GraphQL endpoint, and have it together in order to build your application. So This feature is available in preview on Azure Static Web Apps in the form of database connection, so that you can link and unlink the database that you want to connect to, and then use the front end application. So these are the two ways that we support on through the data API builder. Yeah, that is the jinx of it, like the summary of how the
Yeah.
developers will be able to consume.
So yeah, you talked about GraphQL and how it stitches together with the data API builder. So I do have a idea about the offering, but uh, do you have a demo or something that I can see, and I can see like the configuration file that you showed, schema. Also, it
Sure.
makes sense to me, but yeah, how everything gets
Got
together.
it. Yeah, I think the demo would help the audience to understand it better. Hopefully, the demo works. Let's see. As I mentioned, you can download the DApp CLI. CLI is a command line interface that typically JAMstack developers will deal with. So Static Web Apps also has a CLI. And if you're a developer who uses Data API Builder, you need to download the CLI that we provide for DApp. So once you download, you can see the commands that we support. So we support init, add, update, start, help, and what other things. So with the init command, you should be able to generate the config file. So currently, what I'm doing is I'm doing a dab init, and the database type is Cosmos DB NoSQL API, and then I'm providing the schema, I'm providing a database name, and then the connection string. So if I go and see the config file, you can see the config file, which is auto-generated, which consists of what the data source is, what is the connection string. So we recommend to use the environment variable here, but since it's
Mhm.
a demo, I'm going to just replace. And then you can do some developer settings, such as, enable the GraphQL path, or if you want to enable only GraphQL, you can enable and disable the rest. And then if you enable the development mode, then you have the capability to get a ID to play with GraphQL endpoint. So I will show a quick demo on that, and then the authentication. We will talk about it. Like if you have any
Mhm.
questions on the authentication and authorization, and the final step is to configure the entity. So this is a place where you need to pass, okay, which entity that you want to talk to. Like in this case, I have a Cosmos DB account, which consists of particular information about the wonders of the world. So I'm going
Well,
to use that one. So yeah, so in this case, I will just replace the connection string. I will just copy this connection string and then uh, replace it here. Hopefully it works. And then if I do a dap start, you should see the graphical endpoint generated. And
So
if I, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I wanted to look at how do you define the schema? You mentioned that we can have selective information and all
Okay,
that.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so how is it structured?
So for this particular demo that I wanted to show, you can see that, um, in this case, if I go back to the database, you can see those
Mhm.
fields on the data set. So I'm just going to fetch the same information what you have on the database. So in this case, I have, these fields, but
All
say
right,
if I want to display only longitude and country, I can just define those here in the schema. Yep,
cool. All right, so I can just have some selective fields, and I do
correct.
not need to have a contract from the backend.
That's right. Yep. Um, yep.
Uh, another thing you also mentioned about authentication, Saji, and I see that somewhere it was mentioned anonymous. So are there access control also in place?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is one of the fundamental requirement for web developers, because uh, earlier, I mean, if you can think of how hard it would be to add some authentication to your APIs, right? So we support both modes. Currently, we support, say, if as an end user, if you want to have the endpoint to be public, we support
Mhm.
that as well. And then if you want to have it protected, I mean, this is the typical scenarios. So we are enforcing the that by jaw token provided by the authentication providers such as AAD, and then we also support Azure Static Web Apps. So the user have to create the roles on AAD, Azure AAD, and then based on the claims that we get from the jaw token, we will validate the token and then get the claims. And if the roles provided in the claims matches with what we have on the token, then yeah, we will provide those access to that user. So if I have to give an example, for example, if I have a one day entity name, in this case, you can assume Abhinav, if you're a shop owner and if you want to see only the shop information related to you. So when you log in, you should be able to do read operations and get all the information about your shop, which includes name. And if you want to exclude some of the fields from the response, then you can exclude it from the response as well by using this include and exclude. The other point is that field level authorization. So when I mention field level authorization, say if you want to restrict certain data based on the authenticated user, then what we are saying is that based on the user ID stored on the database, we are getting that information from the claims and then matching that user ID with whatever you have in the database. So say if you want to see only your shops, then you need to write this policy in the config file to make sure that that matches with the request that you make. And then you can define certain roles. Say if you're a shop owner, you can do some actions like create, read, update, and delete. If you want to omit some actions, uh, yeah, you can define those here as well. So that's the power of the data API builder in order to define authentication and authorization for your
So,
endpoints.
so I understand that you can actually control which fields the user has access to, or it is like item level,
Correct.
which
Yeah,
they have access to,
that's
right?
right. Yeah.
All
So
right.
currently, I think even in Cosmos DB, we don't have an item level, but we are
Mhm.
enabling through this something called policy, so that you can
Right.
write a filter with
Mhm.
whatever the information stored on the document level, and then get that data back through the
So it's
GraphQL
like if
endpoint.
I have a database where we have several profiles saved, and
Yeah.
I set the policy where email ID matches my email ID, I'll get only
Correct.
that.
That's right. That's exactly.
That's yeah. That's quite useful feature, very much required. So I think that's a
Yep.
great addition here.
Yep.
Yeah. So coming back to the other point, do we do can you show me like how do we actually host an application? So uh,
Got it.
like you talked about two ways. So yeah.
Okay, this is, I mean, I tried to demo it on the local, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, with the dApp start, you should be able to get your, dApp endpoint running. But the other way is the front-end developers, they can run through Azure Static Web Apps in the form of database connection. So currently, if you see Azure Static Web Apps, it lets the developer to use Azure Functions as a backend to create the backend APIs. So you have to write your own logic in order to connect to backend databases, or if you want to integrate with services with database connection through Data API Builder, we are letting the developers not to write much code. So once you generate this endpoint, you can plug it with your front end and then get the response of what you need from the database. So that's how easy it is to consume through Azure Static Web Apps database connection. Uh, yeah, so this is powered by Azure Cosmos DB infrastructure. So what we are doing is whenever user request, most of you might have known how Azure Static Web Apps works. So whenever you push the code to the repo, it automatically gets deployed to Azure Static Web Apps, the content, the build content, and then you can issue those GraphQL requests to Data API Builder. So once we get those requests are being routed to the infrastructure that we have. Uh, so it allocates containers which runs the Data API Builder engine, which I spoke about earlier, and then it has the capability to, manage and then scale according to the number of requests that we get from these static web apps, and then we deploy closer to the database so that you don't see the latency issues from the end customer perspective. So this is
So
completely
is that a
managed.
choice that the customer makes, or we make that choice
We make
intelligently?
that choice. I mean, it is based on Azure Static Web Apps. I mean, if you're a customer sits in, say, India, so you will be redirected to the nearest container pool, which is created in the South India region. And then those requests will be connecting to the nearest database. I mean,
Hmm.
we let the user to, this creation of database depending on the users, because they might need to connect to existing Cosmos DB account. So depending
Hmm.
on where the database is, you need to create those static web apps nearest to the region.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me show a quick demo on that, since you asked that question,
Yeah,
right?
that
So
really.
if you have to go to Azure Static Web Apps, you would see a feature called database connections, which is what you see here. So in this case, I have deployed my Angular application. So that's what you see here, right? So I have the config file which I showed, and then I have the schema file here. And if I
Mhm.
go to the source code, I have a simple, I would say, services file, which is basically issuing those GraphQL request, what you see here. So, I mean, get operation, update operation, whatever you see here. So this is the only file that I need to change in order to get, okay, what are the information that I want to present on the front end. Right
Mhm.
now, as you could see, like it doesn't have any information, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to link the backend.
Okay.
So in this case, I'm going to use a NoSQL, and then I'm going to use RG Sajee, which is a resource group, and then dap Cosmos demo, and then database name is going to be dap Cosmos demo, and we support both on the authentication mechanism, connection string, as well as managed identity. So I will use the connection string. I will click on acknowledge. That's it. So you are good to go with database connections, which talks to data IP builder and then fetches information through GraphQL. So if I refresh and see, I should see the data being populated. So you can see like it's automatically enabled through data IP builder. Then you can do some GraphQL operations like add, search. Search means the filter operation, and then do it. So that's how easy is it to create, your JAMstack application
So
and
we
deploy on
defined
Azure.
the schema according to what we had to show on the UI,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
uh, and then we established this database connection, and then everything got populated. So
Correct.
if we
Yeah.
make any changes in the underlying data, so that will also
Yeah.
get
Definitely.
reflected in real time.
Correct. I mean, it's similar to how you have dealt with, API in general. So what are the changes that you do? It automatically reflects on the front end.
Quite a
Yeah.
useful
We are.
feature. Very cool.
Thanks, Abhinav.
Yeah. So I think we are on time. So, and Saji, you mentioned that this feature is in preview right now.
Yeah, it's in
So,
public preview.
public preview. Thank you so much, Saji, for doing this session. It was quite informative for me as well. So I think our viewers also found it useful, and I hope to see a lot of adoption of this new feature because this seems very useful for me as well as an application developer. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to, get more feedback, and also, and it's open source, right? So you can always go to this particular URL, and if you go to discussions, you can
Hmm.
open up discussions. And if you want to create, RFCs, like ask for new feature, we like encourage you to come and,
This
provide
seems like a
suggestions.
very engaging community. There are a lot of
That's
discussions
right.
I see.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the power of open source. So yeah.
Yeah. All
Anyway,
right.
thanks, Abhinav. Thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting this episode as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait you to be on this side.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Saji.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.